Hi, welcome to this class. I'm so glad that you have decided to invest time in your job search and create what you want with your career. This is the only video that I'm going to record with me on the screen, but I wanted you to be able to see me so you knew who was talking to you and you had a good sense of who I am as we go through this process, because I'm going to tell you a lot of stories and share some of my personal experiences and then also a lot of experiences that I've had with my clients. So I wanted you to meet me. And I also want to start this out by telling you that I have worked with hundreds of clients in job transition. Most of them have been over 50 and are introverts, and those two demographics fit me as well, which is why this course is targeted specifically around those topics, and we'll weave them throughout this course as we move through this process. But I wanted you to know of the volume of people that I've worked with over the past several years, both through my outplacement work and also through my private practice. I do not have anyone that I'm still tracking who has not landed in a place that they have set their intentions on. And of course, we have calibrated, and we'll talk about that as we move through this process, is integrating feedback about your target and how well that is fitting for you, and if there are some areas of growth that we need to look at to help bolster your position in the market. So given that I've worked on that with my clients and made sure that they are well positioned for the targets they're going after, there's not one person that I can think of who has not landed in a place that they want to be. Now, I do have clients who purposefully take sabbaticals and who make the decision to delay their next position for personal reasons, either that they are doing some ongoing exploration or personal or professional development, but it really, that's their intention, is to take more time than most other people. Most of the people I work with are on a timeline and really dedicated and focused on what they want to create. So what you're going to find as we move through this process is modules and content and tools that will address every dimension of the job search. So what I want to do in this particular video is let you know sometimes this is a daunting process. And there are dips along the way. There certainly are triumphs and celebrations. And the place where people really need support is around the difficult, bumpy parts. So that's where we're going to focus. But I want you to know that there's a lot of exhilaration and possibility and hope in what we're creating here. So even though a lot of the work that we're doing here is going to be on steering around the potholes and navigating those parts that feel challenging, there are many other pieces to it that feel like, hands over head, up in triumph, great celebration. And I'll talk about those as we go through, along with the stories of challenge. But I want you to know that you're not alone if you have energy dips or confidence dips or just a real struggle about who you are and where your value is in the marketplace. And so this content is designed to address those parts that feel like you're by yourself and you don't know what to do. So as we move through this, I want you to think about how much time you're dedicating to the process, because what I've noticed as I work with people is they either fall into one extreme or the other. So on one side, they're either way over and kind of plugged into their computer the whole time and just consumed by this, and it leads to burnout really quickly. The other side is avoidant behaviors and Netflix binges, or, even things that look healthy, like going out on long bike rides and just steering clear of the things that feel challenging. And so what I ask people to do is to consider how much time right now, before you dive into this, you think is reasonable for your life. And so you'll see here on the screen some suggestions based on the work that I've done and the people that I have worked with. But these are guidelines, so make this fit your life as far as the amount of time and the targets. And we'll talk more about the specific goals and targets for your time. So that will be in a coming module. But I also want you to look at, particularly if you're an introvert like me, whether you're spending more time behind the screen than is it most effective. So most of your time needs to be in conversation with people. It's certainly, the research is going to be important, and your resume and customizing your resume, your LinkedIn profile, all of that, and we will cover that. But you also need to be aware of the ratio of your time. How much of your time are you spending in front of the computer versus in front of people? Because you want most of your time to be with other people in either networking conversations or interviews. Also, it can be very helpful to look at this process as the long game. So build in some milestones and look at some things that will be helpful for you as far as what feels replenishing for you, because you're drawing from the well. A lot of output here, energy output. So what refuels you? Make sure that you're building that in. Set up some infrastructure for yourself, and we'll talk about this as we move through this particular module. I'll do some specific action steps around that. But what I want you to know is it's really important to have some support, even anticipating when you're going to have some trouble spots. What does your support look like, and who do you want to include in that? Also, watch your own screen time and see how you're feeling around that. It's a really easy thing to get sucked into the black hole of the computer, either doing work on your job search or just being distracted by everything that's out there. So watch that and see if there's some structures you want to put into place to help support yourself so that you're not disappearing into the computer. And then also, this is the time to set some goals and intentions around your food intake, how much activity you're doing with your body, and how much sleep you're getting. Sleep hygiene, I think, is one of the most important things you can do to care for yourself, because if you do not have a position with regular hours right now, it's really easy to fall into some habits where your sleep is really erratic and all over the place. And so consider for you what will be the best way to put support in for that dimension of your life. I want you to know you are going to find a job. If you do the work that is outlined here, if you integrate feedback from what your actions are, what's happening around either getting hits on what you're submitting, how many people are responding to your approach, and what's happening in your interviews. Are you getting past phone screens? Are you getting to the finalist stage? At each part of the process, we can examine what's happening and make adjustments. And so we'll talk about that as we move through this. I wanted to offer you a story of somebody that I worked with earlier this year, because I think he is a really good example of somebody who had a pretty significant struggle and a pretty significant confidence dip in the middle of his process, and ended up in a really good spot. So his story started with a layoff. He was part of a wave of a pretty large group that was laid off at his company. And because of the age that his kids were, they were both teens and in high school, he wanted to stay in the town where his previous position was because his family was really rooted there. But he was really concerned because he felt like, ooh, I'm in competition against all of these other people who were in this layoff. And they're all hitting the market at the same time that I am. And so we worked initially around those concerns. And we're going to talk about managing your emotions and how to make sure that your actions are springing from determination and curiosity and exploration rather than fear and anxiety and constriction around your own confidence. So, one of the things we did was work with him around connecting with some of the people who were in that same wave of layoff and how much he learned from them and how much he was able to contribute to them. One of the things too that he told me a story of after he had gotten together with a couple of them, and one of them was talking about a company he was a finalist at, and he said, I know a bunch of people there, and so I can talk on his behalf. And he felt really good because that wasn't one of his targets. And and they could share things like looking on Glassdoor and doing reviews and being references for each other. So that was his first hurdle that he overcame. The second thing that happened was he was a finalist for a position he really wanted, and he didn't get it. The other candidate was selected. And that was a crushing blow to him because it was his ideal. It was what he had set out as his target. He had worked really hard and done really well in the interview. He was proud of how he'd done. And they went with the other candidate. So that conversation that he and I had after that blow was a big, important point for him because it would have been easy for him to fall into discouragement and take something out of desperation. So we'll talk more about that because the emotion that is fueling you will really inform where you're going. So if it's desperation and worry, that is very different energy than confidence, determination, purpose. And so we'll talk about how to identify what's at the root of your energy and how that is providing the fuel for where you're going. So what he did then was he doubled down on his target company list, and he did take it beyond his initial geographic target because the clock was ticking, and he felt that he needed to take the scope of his search a little further and talk with his family about the real possibility of moving. And that changed it because he felt like his pool of possibility was much bigger. And what happened was he ended up with an offer in his geographic target in the town where his kids were in school, his original goal. And so that was luck, but it was also the sense that he had options. And so he did land in a great place. And one of the things he said to me when we were debriefing after he was doing the final acceptance on the offer was he said, if I had known that this position would be something that was available to me right in the midst of my lowest point in this search, right after that rejection that was so crushing, it could have really bolstered me and fueled me. And so I'm offering that to you now because we don't know what is available to you. Just as when he and I had that conversation at the midterm of his search, that would be available to him. So those things are blind to you, and they are possible, and it really happens where people end up in spots that are better than this thing that they thought was their ideal. So keep going when you hit a dip and realize that there's other things out there. And yes, you may need to adjust your scope, and you may need to change your focus, and you may need to add to your repertoire. So all of those things are possibilities about what will need to happen so that you can get to the place that you want to be. So we're going to end every module with action steps, specific things that I want you to focus on as you're completing each module. So for this one, I want you to think about 3 people who you think will be helpful supports to you in this process. It's best if they're not people that you live with, because usually people like your spouse or your partner and your kids and people who live in your household are intertwined with your fate and their own worries. They're having trouble probably managing them, and that kind of contaminates what they're, even though they want to support you from a place of neutrality, they usually have an idea about what's going to be best, and their anxiety can spill over. So look for people outside your immediate family, and think about me too. One of the things I offer is individual sessions so that you can have a neutral person really help you objectively evaluate what's going on. But what I want you to do is think about people in your life. They don't have to be near to you geographically. They can be available via phone or video. And tell them, hey, I'm starting on this job search and I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I've gotten some advice that it may be helpful for me to have some people kind of on call. So I'm wondering if that would be you. And you can tell them what that involves for you. Like, could you check up on me regularly, or don't, all I'm asking is if I call you that you'll know that I may be in a place of need. So design that with them. It may, as an introvert, I feel like don't just text me, don't call me. That's actually a title of a book that an introvert wrote. Text, don't call. So you can find specific avenues and infrastructure that really works for you. And one of the things I do too is I have a process that I use to check in with myself so that I can know whether I need support. As an introvert, that's one of the most important things for me. So I want to invite you to think about what's going to be useful to you and ask people now. Also look for job search groups. I would just Google job search group and put in the name of your town, because it helps to be able to meet with people in person, and you can learn a lot from other job seekers. And it kind of replaces that community. Even if you are currently employed, it's really hard to talk to people at your current work about your job search. So it's just good to know what else is happening in the job market and where people are struggling and where they're succeeding. Also set up your calendar. I want you to look at whether you're going to be served by a regular time when you do a easing into bed, easing out of screen time ritual, if it helps you to wake up at the same time every day, if you want to include workouts, and then put in specific times for your job search. And if you want to move them around, because, if you have time to go on a hike and it's a beautiful day, you can do it, but just move that block of time to another spot. Make sure you're showing up for yourself and following through in your commitment to yourself in this job search. And that is also to help make sure that you don't overdo it. And we'll talk some more in another module about goal setting and making sure that you're setting your focus of your time on things that will be really helpful to you. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that we're working together on this. Please send me any questions that you have about this. You're going to see my email on all of the handouts and all of the slide decks. So use that. It's Maggie@maggie-graham.com. I want to hear about how you're doing. I want to hear if things are not working here and if there needs to be adjustments in the tech of the course. And I want to hear if you're having some need for extra support. So let me know about that, and we will stay in touch as we move through this process together.